2 and a half. Going. A warm welcome, everyone, to our eHealth Learning podcast, a space where we encourage the sharing of knowledge and the support that brings. Thank you all for joining us today. Today, I'm talking with my guest, Maxine Matthews, yoga teacher for over 20 years. Today, we're going to be focusing our conversation on how we might bring curiosity and discernment into our daily practice. If you have any questions for Maxine as our conversation arises, please do put them on the chat box and we'll make a bit of time at the end to answer those questions for you. So a very warm welcome, Maxine. Hi.
Hello, Natalie. Today? Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. And where are you?
I am in Coltishall, just outside Norwich, on what is now a lovely sunny day, but has been just really wet up until about 3 o'clock, but just looking lovely now.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So Maxine and I are really old friends. We have been practicing together. Well, I've been coming to your class for a long time now. And the one thing that really inspired me to come back, I suppose, again and again, is your approach to practice. So I'd always had sort of experience of very traditional yoga classes and shoulder stands, lots of different postures, quite kind of active, quite pushy, I suppose.
Yeah.
And when I started to come into your classes, I experienced something very, very, very different. And it kind of brought me into myself. I don't know how else to really describe that. So I kind of would really like you to share how you've kind of, because I know your roots quite traditional. So you come.
Yes.
Is it the wheel?
The British Wheel of Yoga was my training, yeah.
So very traditional. And then as your practice has developed, you've kind of brought other things in.
Yes.
And I wonder if you might just share that with us.
Happy to. Yes, I am. So I think I started practicing yoga in my 20s, which is a lot longer ago than 20 years. Really, I was interested in sort of Eastern philosophy, and I was also interested in movement. I was never really a sports person, and yoga kind of really just did the trick for me, really. And I enjoyed the movement, and I carried on in that way. And then I had my family, my children, and I didn't practice quite a long time, really. And it was really because I was unwell that I went back to yoga, because I had a kind of mysterious unwellness, which the doctors couldn't sort of put their finger on or help me with. But it was really going back to yoga that made me well again. And by this time, I was probably in my early 30s, I suppose, early to mid 30s. And so I started going back to yoga classes, and I found a delightful teacher who was kind of a bit of a hybrid between, she was traditional, but she was also kind of variable as well. And as I went back, as I say, I became well. So that, the power of the practice was certainly very evident to me. Anyway, it was the teacher that suggested that I do my teacher training, and pretty much around then, the British Wheel of Yoga was the main school of teacher training for yoga. And there still are the sort of main authorization on the safe practice of teaching in the UK. And I have to say, to their credit, they are not a style, which is very good, I think, but they are about safe practice, and they encompass or they welcome all schools and all styles, which is great. But nevertheless, it's a 3-year course, and meeting once a month, I think, and then lots of homework, lots of essays and written work, and but I trudged on through and I enjoyed it. But as I sort of got nearer and nearer to the end, there was something about it that I couldn't really put my finger on it. It wasn't really sort of hitting the spot for me. I felt there was something missing, or that I was missing something. And I just started to explore around the different teachers. I was living in London at the time, which is where I'm from. And I came across a teacher called Bill Wood, and the practice called often referred to as Scaravelli-inspired yoga, after the Italian aristocrat Vanda Scaravelli. She was very keen for it not to be called Scaravelli yoga. She didn't want to be tagged with that kind of a label. And so that's, I think, why it's referred to as Scaravelli inspired. And once I worked with Bill, the practice was just a lot freer, a lot less dogmatic, a lot less prescriptive, more about sensing and feeling and becoming your own teacher and just doing what's right for you. That from then on, I just started to sort of look around for other teachers in this ilk, if you like. And to my surprise, they were all different, which was fascinating to me, because I don't know if you know, but if you sort of take a Shivananda or an Iyengar course, or an Ashtanga course indeed, it's very prescriptive. And the teachers kind of turn out the same in a way. The instructions are the same, and this was so different from that. And so I worked with John Stirk, Peter Blackaby, Chloe Fremantle, all sorts of different people. And it really felt like home to me. And that was the beginning of this wonderful evolving journey for me that carried on for over 20 years, and is still carrying on. It's not, there's nothing finite about it. There's nothing like, oh, I've got my qualification, I've got my lesson plans, I've got my accreditation, here I go, sort of thing. And it wasn't like that at all. And that can be quite scary, because I think the sort of accreditation idea gives you legitimacy, especially as a new teacher. You feel that you have to sort of hang your hat somewhere, so to speak. And so it was really quite scary for me to sort of go out there with this exploratory stuff. But as with you, Nat, and with a lot of other people, the response you get from students is really what inspires me to carry on.
Wonderful. So. Yeah, wonderful. I mean, would you just give us a little hint around Vanda's, where she's coming from in her kind of, it's like a deconstruction. I don't know.
Yeah.
Words that she, yeah.
Well, she has written a couple of books. Her main book is Awakening the Spine. And it's very much about the spine, Vanda's work. And I have sort of worked around that kind of theme. I dip in and out of it, really. But there were three kind of aspects to Vanda's approach. And that was ground, breath, release. And so we have the idea, or I think, as far as much as I understand it, is that if we can find ground, which is about support, and if we can, especially, she works very much with the exhalation. The exhalation is not a form of collapse, it's a form of release and inspiration. And I think the idea of that the exhalation is something to do with collapse, something to do with rest, which it can be. I'm not saying it isn't, it can be. I mean, for instance, in Shavasana, or when we're resting, the exhalation is extremely connected with grounding. It has a huge connection with grounding, the exhalation. But it can also, one of the strange things about Vanda is the dichotomy. So the rest can be active, but the rest can also be passive, if that makes sense. So if you're lying at the beginning and the end of class, maybe either in Shavasana or semi-supine, with your knees bent, it's definitely the exhalation is connected with that idea of release and letting go and quietening the muscles. But when you're working, when you're moving, the exhalation is something quite different. It's a form of release of the spine. And Vanda had this, I suppose, scientific approach that there was a separation at the back of the waist, where from the lumbar vertebrae number 5, we move down, and from above that we move up. So it's very much connect with that ground release. We go down to go up, we go up to go down. There's very much that connection. And the dichotomy of this can be very unsettling. You think, oh, it's always like this, or it's always like that. And then suddenly you find it's quite the opposite, which again is one of the things that inspires me to carry on and to work and to practice and to teach, is that constant, it's like the unknowing somehow. We have permission to not know. I can say in class, oh, actually, I don't know the answer to that. What do you think? And I think that response in class is really liberating for a teacher, because we can put ourselves, or we can be put on a pedestal. This kind of all-knowing, this person knows, this person understands, this person will tell me exactly what to do. And it is so liberating to be able to say, actually, I don't know, this is how it feels for me. How does it feel for you? Sorry, I've diverged off the Vanda thing a bit, haven't I?
No, actually, because I think where you're leading us now is into curiosity and
yes,
into discernment. So, through this kind of physical contact with the movement of your body, it's allowing some, consciousness to rise around questioning, is this useful? What am I doing? What is it that I'm doing? Am I just this automatron doing my regular, this is how I understand dog to be, So, one of the wonderful things that you gave me was my high heels when I'm doing dog. Because this idea of trying to put my heels on the floor, it was going to break me. But, I'd do it if I felt like that's what dogs should be.
Yes.
Actually, what's that doing to my hamstrings? Well, ow. So,
ouch. Yes. So this idea of discernment is very interesting, isn't it? To decide what's useful and what's not. And that's something that I like to hand over to students, for them to decide what's useful and what's not. And that can be quite complicated and actually take quite a long time, because I think we all slip into habits, don't we, of movement and action and postural movements. And we probably, we all have habits, we lean a bit one way, or we take a bit more weight on one foot, or we have a tendency for one shoulder to be up rather than down. And I think probably most habits were useful at one point. We developed a habit because it was useful. And so to then really be curious about, is that still really useful? Do I really need to carry my right shoulder up around my ear? Doesn't seem very useful to me, is it? So to understand those sort of biases, they become dominant, you see, they become entrenched. And you find people don't even really notice that they're doing these unnecessary holdings. And what happens is, when the bias becomes entrenched, we get a lack of choice of movement. Our options are less because of that. And so that's another big part of practice, actually, especially around discernment. As you said, that's what we started off sort of labeling the chat about, was discernment. And what is that? What is discernment? You don't come to class for exercise or performance. You come to be present. And to notice and to ask yourself a sense of inquiry. To ask yourself, is this useful?
The body loves patterns, doesn't it? It loves to create these patterns, and we're so brilliant at compensation, and a lot of those kind of movements or holdings, are unconscious, because we just think, oh, that's the way I am, and then you come to a class like yours and you realize, oh my God, that isn't how I am. I actually have a choice about changing it up. Oh, I don't need to hold myself up. My bones do that for me. If I've got my feet on the floor, then I've got my skeleton holding me up,
stacking up.
Really, like, I don't have to do it.
No, that's right.
So for me, the challenge always is to make sure I'm not doing it. And I know that kind of sounds a little bit at odds, but the body knows, doesn't it? It's like,
Yeah, the body does know. The body's very wise, and the body talks to us, doesn't it? It talks to us via the nervous system, and in response to our situation and our environment. It talks to us all the time, but a lot of the time, especially this day and age, we're so busy, we're not listening. We're not listening to our body. I mean, after all, although yoga has evolved and continues to evolve, praise be to that. There is still the origin, really, or the original remit is to relieve suffering. And the suffering might be physical, emotional, or psychological. But I still adhere to that. I still think that's a very important point of practice. Why we practice is to relieve suffering for ourselves, and hopefully, if we can pay attention and address those aspects of our being, then it serves us off the mat as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, how can it not?
Yeah.
I remember when I first started coming to your class, and the first two were kind of, I found it really, really challenging emotionally, because I found a lot of stuff coming up. And I think the third time I came I just had to lie on the mat and cry and then not do anything at all. It was like I just had to be brave enough to not listen to instruction, to not worry about what anyone else was doing, not worry about what I was doing, but just feel what was going on in my body. There was something around a kind of homecoming, I suppose.
Yeah.
But also, it doesn't feel very comfortable. So, it's also a very good place to test those things out. The mat's quite a safe place, or potentially.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, the environment of the class should be a safe place, shouldn't it?
Yeah. And so, the way of moving was it came out, it stopped being mechanical and it started to be insightful. So when that started happening for me, a lot started happening for me.
Wow.
Wow. Really interesting.
Well, I mean, when I was saying about how the body talks to us, our bodies hold a map of our physical and emotional history. Like I said, we have biases, we have habits. We need you to be brave at some point, so we have a habit maybe to clench our jaw or to hold a fist, and that was useful at the point of need. And so the inquiry is it still needed? You don't need to clench your jaw when you're doing dog pose, or clench your belly when you're doing child pose, or in that simplest sense, that sort of thing. Things that are, and as we start to notice those quite maybe loudest things, they shout the loudest, those things, then we can move towards being more discerning and notice even a deeper level, I think, and start to notice. I think you were saying something about the internal feeling of practice and how you found that.
Yeah, because it's different to the idea of shape making. It's there's no end goal. You're not aiming to be getting anywhere other than, it started with the feet for me. So when you introduced me to my feet and how movement, and I think that's very Vanda, if I'm correct.
Yes, definitely Vanda, yeah.
When you are watching a small baby, a tot who's crawling along the floor and maybe then wants to kind of roll over, they're going to put their foot out, aren't they, and use the counterweight to sort of, so the movement is coming from the feet rather than, other muscles.
But those compliant movements, you mean? That's compliant movements, yeah. I think that's, I mean, I would say not all movements are compliant, and that again is a dichotomy, really. I mean, they can be, but when a movement is compliant, in case somebody's wondering, it's just that you use your whole body to twist or turn or move in a certain way, so that the movement is more efficient and easier. And you might be even moving more towards a posture, a shape, but you're doing it in a very organic way. As I say, and also I think actually I was thinking recently about this working compliantly. It kind of links for me. It links in with the idea that yoga is a whole body experience. Body, breath, and mind. I mean, that's quite a familiar term, body, breath, and mind in terms of yoga. But it seems to me there's a link there between compliant movements, whole body movements, and the fact that our practice is about all of us, the whole of us. Our emotions, our physiology, our physique, our habits, our things that aren't so easy. It just seems to make a link there to me.
Yeah, I think that's really it's really relevant, because we do need to stop compartmentalizing in a way. It's like, how do we bring it all together into the whole? How could we be one person, not just fractions of, the body is not separate,
No, absolutely. No.
It's not separate. So how can, it's like playing a nice chord.
That's
we
lovely.
in Bowen, we talk about playing a nice chord. How do we find the resonance?
Yes.
Different part of ourselves to kind of sing along together.
Yes, that's beautiful. Wow.
Make this lovely note, and the other aspect of the practice that I discovered is this idea of flossing as well. So it's particularly joints, how do we get to those deeper parts of ourselves, with discernment, because that's when I start to feel like something's really going on. It's like,
that's interesting.
Because I haven't forced something to stretch. So I suppose I'm kind of, in a way, suggesting, there's nothing wrong with stretching, is there? We all do it. However, when we're kind of using it as a counter to maybe doing exercise, then we do stretch. Sometimes that can be really not very useful and actually can cause injury.
Well, it's a common phrase, isn't it? Yoga stretches. I can't remember what teacher it was. It might have been Bill Wood. It might have been Mark Walford. Can't remember. Anyway, they were saying the thing about stretching is that it can be rather counterproductive, because if we stretch, when we stop stretching, there's a contraction. So the body is, the tissues, the fascia and the tendons and the muscles and all the soft tissue are rather like an elastic band. If you keep stretching it and stretching it, it's either going to ping and not lose its stretchiness, or it's going to completely contract back into a shortening. And I thought, that's really interesting. That's fascinating. If that's what stretching does. But the upside of that is that if we contract, then the response to contraction is release. So, which side are you on? Do you want to contract and release, or do you want to stretch and be tight? It's just, and that's very Randa as well, actually. That's very much Randa. So she had very few, she only taught one-to-one. She never did general classes. She did work with Iyengar for a while, and she worked with Krishnamacharya, Krishnamurti, and there seem to have been two kind of spin-off schools from her. There were two main schools. One was through Diane Long, and the other was through Mary Stewart. I think Mary is still around. Diane's definitely around. I think Mary's still around, but they had very different approaches. And again, that idea that there's not this kind of lineage that pumps out these teachers that are just, beautifully equipped to do all the same thing. I don't mean that in a harsh sense. I'm sorry if it sounds like that, but it's the allowance for variation, for personality, for personal exploration, that she kind of engendered. and apparently often she wouldn't answer questions when people asked her, is this right? Shall I do this? She just wouldn't answer. She'd just sometimes leave the room, or just leave people to it, and they'd have to find out for themselves. So if anyone knows Diane Long or Mary Stewart, you'll know that they are really very, very different teachers. Diane's really quite punchy, and Mary's very soft. But they're all a spin-off from Vanda's work. And as I said, this idea that all the teachers that work with her are different because it kind of gives you permission somehow to and confidence that it's okay not to be like everybody else. So even the Scaravelli teachers are not the same. If you've been to any other Scaravelli inspired teachers, you might find them very different. You might find them similar, but you might find them very, very different, which I think is great. It becomes less definitive. And I love it in class when I see people doing different things other than my suggestion. And I love it also when they decide not to do anything at all. I think that's great. I couldn't be more pleased when I see that happen. I might just check that they feel okay, that there's nothing untoward going on, sort of thing, if you like. But other than that, I couldn't be more pleased when I see that happening on the mat, really. Yeah.
Well, that's lovely that you allow, because it comes back to us trying to just allow what is and to allow what's going on in this moment right now. So we're just gonna let everyone be an individual, and there's an equanimity that exists between everybody. And because we're not striving to get somewhere, it's okay, isn't it? It's like,
absolutely.
And then there's some encouragement around, because stuff, we might be moving through stuff. It might be that there's a block that's really being tackled in that moment. So that needs time, doesn't it? You can't,
absolutely, it does. Yeah, absolutely.
Really, force that. So if we go back to this idea of flossing something, that feeling of going really, really deep, but also at the same time cleaning out and making room, that potentially can be a very fragile place. Because I notice when it happens for me, if I'm really in my hips, or then suddenly I feel like my liver, kind of the fascial band in my liver, and I'm feeling a little bit nauseous, or and I've got to really take it easy because it's taking me there, So when I've got to know when to take my foot off the pedal, in responsibility, I shouldn't expect you to know that. It's like I have to then, it's my mat, my space, my body, to know when I just, press a little bit more, or I rest a little bit more. Both have an equal kind of part, don't they?
Absolutely, they're all part of the practice, aren't they? And also this way of teaching is what I might call bottom-up learning instead of top-down. So I would call something that was top-down teaching like an instruction. Okay, stand up, take your feet apart, put your left foot here, put your right foot there, turn this way, turn that way, do this with your right arm. That's top-down. But this approach, I feel, is very much the opposite. It's bottom-up. It's handing over permission, if you like, and not so much sort of responsibility, but it hands over the inquiry to the student instead of being told what to do, which, as I say, can really just sort of slip into exercise or performance, can't it?
And again, that's where discernment can creep in. Havas has an opportunity, because you can then kind of go, oh, this is what I do. This is my regular habit, and then you can have inquiry about that, can't you? But it's not a bad thing, it's just what I do. And like you say, at some point in time that would have been a supportive movement, but right now it's kind of getting in the way. How am I gonna stop doing that? And it's kind of not to shame that part of yourself, is it?
No, gosh, no.
But to kind of put a soft focus and go, oh God, I'm doing that again. At least you have a choice to change it then, don't you? Right.
Absolutely. Like I say, the ball's in your court, isn't it, really? And I'm there to kind of hold the space. That's what I feel, to hold the space and to offer suggestions.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, to allow for that individuality to blossom and that self-awareness to grow.
Yeah.
I think repetitions are useful as well. When we come across a block, I mean, we often notice that something's easier on one side than the other, don't we? That's very, very common thing to notice, and I think in that case, very small repetitions help. And I mean, we can do repetitions like if we go to the gym. I have never been to the gym, by the way, never been. But you can do repetitious movements in a gym, can't you? If you want to increase the density of your bones or increase the strength of your muscles, But you can also do it while you listen to music. So where's the attention, in that? And as I say, there's nothing wrong with exercise in that way. And it makes people feel good. It makes them healthier, gets their cardiovascular, system going. And that's all good stuff, isn't it? But it's just that it's different, and I suppose to differentiate between what is yoga and what is exercise or performance is a useful thing. And I would say the thing that differentiates it is the attention. So it's no good just mindlessly repeating a movement. Well, it might be useful, but it's not yoga. But we have to repeat it with attention so that we notice if this time we go a bit further, or if it's a bit tricky on that side, or it's that puts it in the yoga category rather than the performance or exercise.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, and in that, there's a real slowing down, isn't there?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, you can't. You like if you don't notice if you go too fast, do you? If you rush into something, you might hurt yourself. But yeah, you don't notice. The slow is another thing, isn't it? Really, that makes it invites our curiosity. Otherwise, it kind of bypasses. We bypass it, don't we? Yeah, we do. And the curiosity helps to make students their own teacher. Like I was saying about, instead of being an instructor, I'm a kind of facilitator that holds the space so that each person can become their own teacher. What a wise thing that is, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'm not somebody who can do my practice by myself. I love to come to the class and, have to be held. I think I just really need to be held, actually. I think that's why I come, because I know that I can really open to listen to my body. Yeah, so there's something around how I can, I've got this very, established practice, but each time I come to the mat, it's something new.
Okay.
That's in there as well. And I'm wondering, because we started the year with you sort of recognizing that you discovered something about yourself in your practice. Remember about that bit in your spine and about how
yes, about my scoliosis. Yeah.
And so that was quite a revelatory point for you.
Yes.
It's wonderful to hear from a teacher. It's like, oh, you've been practicing for X amount of years, and yet there are still these places to discover.
Yeah.
And timing is everything, isn't it? So, all your years of practice are kind of leading you to this moment. I wonder if you might just explain kind of what happened, because it was a bit of a eureka moment in a way.
It was.
Something happened for me when that happened for you, because it helped
me.
Because it helped me to recognize something going on. This lift, it's like, oh, suddenly I'm kind of
that one. Oh, you mean the extension one? Oh, okay. Well, I mean, yeah. Like you said, you have a sort of an established practice, and I have an established practice as well. But it's only because I practice regularly every day that doors are open to me. That like I said, if I get on my mat and do a certain kind of sun salutation, for however many rounds, I could kind of do that mechanically, couldn't I? But what I find is that if I slow down as I do my practice, and as we said, I'm much more likely to notice things, and then that prompts me to do something else. So it prompts me. I say, it's difficult to sort of explain. Really, it's not. It comes from a not knowing. Really, the prompt comes from a not knowing and a curiosity about what just happened, and. And I suppose we also sort of slip, again, biases and habits. We slip into this idea that, okay, an extension movement comes from this place in my spine. I've worked for years in prone back bends, thinking about that place in the middle of my thoracic spine, to lift from there. And there's not, and that's not wrong. I'd like to say that's not wrong, and it's very useful. But I have to really sort of acknowledge my daughter's input, really. And I know Hayley is someone that you've had on the podcast, and I watch with interest. And so I do have to acknowledge her part in this, because she was talking about actually we can. I mean, that's very Vanda, actually, that the whole spine takes part in every movement. That's very Scaravelli. But Hayley was saying about there's this place really. What she called the lumbar dorsal hinge, which is the 12th vertebrae of the thoracic and the first vertebrae of the lumbar. And it's often where the spine changes direction that needs our attention, then it gets a bit sleepy. And it was really from there, and the instruction, the way Hayley sort of suggested that we move, that really inspired me. And what happened was the feeling in my body when I did it that way was that was the revelation, that was the light bulb moment, through the feeling of it, because my body did it, because I explored with my physicality, with my spine and my breath, that movement. And I remember you coming in and saying about lifting the heart and how emotional that was, and what you could hardly contain yourself for the joy of it, which was really delightful. So always open to learning, always, again, that the habit of moving from between my shoulder blades, in cobra or some similar type cobra movement, is rather entrenched with me. It hasn't done me any harm, but there's another. I'm not going to stop doing the other. I'm going to do both. It's just added something else to my vocabulary of movement, and enriched my practice. And my hope as I carry on that won't change. There'll always be those moments of enlightenment, if you like, if that's not too big a word. Yeah, exactly. It's wonderful to discover those things. And sometimes, the day is a bit kind of pressed, or you feel a bit dreary, and so sometimes it's nice to have a pattern, a sequence, a habit of movements and things, and you can just get on your mat and trust it and do those things, and that's fine too. But let's not get entrenched in that. It serves us well at certain times. As I say, for beginners especially, I think it's nice to have a kind of format, but let's not get entrenched in either. Let's be freer, let's be variable, let's be open to change, and learning something new.
And being an individual in the practice, because lots of people really struggle with restrictions, and that could be to do with it could be to do with anything. You might have scar tissue, you might have arthritis, you might have really short hamstrings, you might, finding a way to practice that's within a reality for your body, is enough, isn't it? It's like,
absolutely,
go beyond that. So this kind of non-prescriptive way of working really allows the individual, doesn't it?
Definitely. I really like that non-prescriptive. I mean, obviously we need a few kind of links, don't we, and keys, just enough though, to allow us to explore and to make that individual. And another thing is about those working slowly so that we notice, I think, is that if we have kind of like you say, arthritis or a stiffness or something that hinders us in some way, then it's really these very small movements. We don't have to do anything big or drastic. Unfortunately, it's not a quick fix. You have to do a little every day, or most days. But if we do that, especially as we get older, we can really avoid limiting our choices of movement. And I think especially for as people get older and things kind of creep in, things that are a stiff shoulder, a stiff knee, or whatever, there's quite a common attitude that it's kind of the beginning of the end and nothing can be done. And I think that's a real shame, because we should always maintain the movement that we have. And in doing that through small repetitious movements, 2 or 3 times a week for 20 minutes or whatever, we can really not only keep what we've got, but gain some more, and still be able to climb the stairs and sit up and get out of your chair and sit down again easily without props and and sticks and things. It's so useful, these small repetitive movements. Very, very useful, I think. And we do big ones too sometimes, don't we? Sometimes we're spending lots and lots of quiet time. Sometimes we never come to standing, do we, in class? And then sometimes I might just sort of throw something in that's a bit more dynamic. And I think that kind of jolts the mindset a bit sometimes, because we can get a bit sleepy. It's very well to sort of lay quietly and do all these sort of meditative small things, but we need to jolt the system a bit sometimes, especially the mind, not so much the body, but the mind. So I do like to mix it up a bit. And as I say, although we often have a class where we don't stand at all. I like to mix it up a bit.
And that really helps us to not get entrenched in the stories of our physicality or health, because old age can be such a story, can't it, around restriction and, I'm falling apart, or, and it can be true too. But if you can somehow work with your limitations in a very compassionate, empathetic, gentle way, then one might find the joy in movement.
Absolutely.
So it frees the mind, doesn't it? It's like the mind isn't then telling you that this is how you are now. And because actually those small repetitive movements will start to change the way you experience the way you do move.
Absolutely.
So
and often the doctors say, "Oh, it's arthritis, dear. Nothing we can do," don't they? That's not true. That's not true.
I know. And for some people, that's so horrific and shocking. Just suddenly have that label. Just sort of thrown at you. There's loads one can do, and actually movement is really important, a really important part of that, isn't it?
Definitely. I mean, I'm sure you find people come to you for Bowen, don't you, that have been given a rather sad diagnosis.
And actually, so much is around kind of having discernment, really. Working with what might you be doing to actually be harming yourself. So bringing in attention around the things that you do that could be detrimental, or even causing the problem. It might not be that the arthritis is the problem. It's just the way you sit at your desk all day, or
the way you put your foot on the ground.
Exactly. Exactly. So, really being able to get the microscope on those things can be incredibly powerful, can't they, and change.
Absolutely.
They can really create change and be the drivers for change, which means we're not getting embodied, not getting entrenched in those stories.
Yes, I think also sort of modern current lifestyle, is so racy for lots of people that they can't find 10 minutes to do something that's useful and helpful to them, or they think they can't. Aren't we all sort of dashing around and on to the next thing all the time, really. That's no wonder when we do have time to rest, we just collapse, you know. The balance is not quite right for lots of people, is it?
No, no, that's a real challenge, isn't it? You know,
Mm.
there's the story that we don't have time.
Yeah. Well, you won't have time eventually.
But right now, there's probably, you know, a chance you could get 10 minutes to get on the mat.
Yeah.
So it's like, again, could potentially be a story, you know.
Yeah.
So,
So it just reminded me of something you were saying when I was saying earlier about we were talking about compliant movements. I think that was the conversation, and I was also talking about training and how we sort of in a yoga teacher's training we learn anatomy and physiology, and I don't refer to it a lot, but I wanted just to say that you were right in that we take things apart so we can put them back together. So it does play a part. You know, we may kind of not disregard it, but not find it so useful as when we've been teaching for years and years. But there is that part to it. You know, the idea of the science of the body, and I think you were linking it somewhat to painting, and saying that you really can't be a abstract painter unless you can take something apart first. You can't put it back together in a different way, if you like. And I think there's a really interesting analogy that I mean, some teachers are very anatomical in their teaching, and I'm not, but it does play a part. You know, you do need to have it's useful to have a certain amount of understanding of how the body put together, and that does help. And the taking apart in the non-compliant movements is probably very useful in helping us put it together as a compliant movement. Does that make sense? So if we separate parts of the body and move them independently, it increases our awareness so that when we come to a compliant movement with the whole body, we have a better picture. We have a better map. We have a better map, don't we, of the whole of us, if that makes sense.
yeah, because for me, I would then recognize that if my lower back is feeling not very strong, weak, then my neck will kick in. And you can bet your bottom dollar 2 days later, I'm in the shower, brushing my hair, and my neck goes. Like
Yeah.
it's a kind of the classic relationship that I have. That's my kind of, yeah. So I really do have to tell my neck to stay out of it, really work on, my lower back and my core,
Yeah.
and make sure that I'm not in a block.
Yes. Yeah. So breaking it down helps us put it back together, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. Yeah. I mean, I don't wake up every day feeling, grand. I might have a stiff neck or a stiff hip or a knee or something, but in a way that, that guides my practice. So I do some movements that I feel will help ease that, to free it up a bit, to just some little things, that but you're paying attention to what your body needs, just like you say you are, really, and what it needs and what it doesn't need. Yeah, you do. So, and it's that regular. The yoga is such a gift, to help us, to feel and be well. I mean, obviously, there's some things that it really can't address. Some severe illnesses that, well, I wouldn't say it can't address it, but it might help your general feeling of well-being. But you know what I mean? But I mean, on the minor level, those little aches and pains that sort of creep in as we get older, they can be very, very easily addressed, and you can feel better, just by those tiny things. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing.
It is, and it's like a dance, really.
Ah.
I think
Mm.
and it can help us to we can dance with ourselves, but we could also dance with our environment, you know, in relation to, you know, what is it I need to be doing now? So if I'm really, really busy, if I'm gone a bit, you know, crazy with rushing around, it's harder for me to kind of discern what is going on. If I can slow down, take a breath, feel my feet on the ground, heel, big toe, little toe.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
Establish some kind of grounding. Come into my diaphragm, come into my breath. Oh, you know.
Yeah. Breath is so useful, isn't it? Really, so useful. I tend not. I mean, obviously, I'm sure most people know there's a lot of practices around breathing with yoga. Traditionally, you know, through the various lineages, practices that we collectively call pranayama. But really, I think that's one of the areas that I don't go to so much in detail, because I feel really that's really a place where a lot of habits and biases live for people. Situations and history and experience are really held and reflected in the way people breathe. So my opinion at the moment is, and has been for a while, is that to impose quite complicated patterns on someone's breathing habit can just add to the problem rather than lessen it. So to pay attention, really. And we work with the exhalation, don't we? And that experience of undoing and letting go, and the pause at the end of the out breath, and that kind of noticing sort of things. But I don't really teach those complicated ratios and things. I don't really feel that they're helpful. I think they potentially can be very unhelpful, actually. But it's evolving, isn't it? You know, yoga's evolving all the time. And that might sort of bring me on to something else about how we talked about sort of blurred edges before, and other modalities, other movement modalities. I'm quite inspired by Feldenkrais at the time. So at the moment, I mean, and also somatics, somatic movement. I find them so similar to yoga, or so similar to the way that I like to practice yoga, that it's hard to define. Not that we need to draw a line or, you know, put each in a box, I suppose, but I think these blurred edges is part of the evolution of practice. And so what, you know, so what if we can move with awareness and slowly and noticing. What does it matter what the label is, you know? And I do question that quite a lot at the moment. Well, what makes it yoga then? What makes it yoga? Because the attention that you give to somatic movement and Feldenkrais is every bit as intense or as involved as yoga. And why do we separate all these things? Maybe it just makes it easy to choose a class to go to. I don't know. But I welcome that. I really welcome those blurred edges and that. Yeah, I do.
Wow. Well, that's lovely. I'm just looking at the time.
Oh,
It's we've got about 10 minutes. So I'm wondering if anyone who's joined us today would like to ask Maxine a question. I've been inspired by our talk. I wanted to say that Maxine practices in Norwich on a Wednesday, but also her classes are available on Zoom. So if anyone was interested in attending Maxine's class, people could just get in touch with you. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're welcome.
Use your website address.
Yes.
Because they're recorded, people wouldn't necessarily need to join Wednesday 9 till 10.
No, absolutely. That's been one of the beauties, haven't it, of Zoom, really? I mean, initially it didn't seem such a grand idea, but there's been very positive things, like since you moved out of Norwich, you know, and other people not in town, they can come, and if they usually come to class and can't come, they can have the recording. You know, it's just it's been very useful, that actually, very positive.
I mean, an absolute lifeline for me.
I was
Um,
interested what you said about you need to be held in the space, even though you're on Zoom.
yeah,
Isn't that interesting?
yeah,
Isn't it?
yeah.
It
It's a
kind of
kind
it
of,
traverses across the airways. Yeah.
it really does. And it also keys into a routine of my self-care. So it's
Ah,
like, I know that, I have to do it. Otherwise, I'm a nightmare. Everyone around me, it's like I owe it to myself and to everyone I love to be
yeah.
going to my yoga classes.
Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, they're
you
beautiful.
know so yeah, as part of a self-care routine, which I hope everyone has, whatever it is, whatever medicine you need to take, whether it's
Mm,
being out in nature,
mm,
swimming in a cold pond, in the sea, yoga, any,
mm.
body work, whatever, you know. Um, yeah, that has to be part of the kind of repertoire, isn't it, of wellness?
Yeah, it's an important part, and it yeah, it's quite an exploration to find out what it is that you need, isn't it? Yeah, it is. But yeah, don't give up. That's there somewhere.
Absolutely. And when you find something that's really good for you, it's like don't not do it.
Mm, yeah.
Always, find the time. It's you're important.
Mm,
It's like your wellness and your body and the
mm,
value. Because I think we can so easily disregard that. You know,
mm,
maybe putting up, if you're a busy mom or you're a carer or whatever,
mm.
tend to be bottom of the list, don't you? So
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
vital that you're looking after yourself because no one else is going to do that bit for you. It's
No,
what I've
no,
discovered,
no, they're
so
not. No,
that's
that's really important. Yeah, it is. And
yeah,
and also trust that you'll know when you find it.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Mm,
yeah. 'Cause it
mm.
definitely yeah, like you say, it's not just happening on the mat. It just permeates
Mm,
out into your life, doesn't it? It's in this sort of invisible way, because you feel well, or because it's something that helps you feel well, you're
yeah.
okay in the world, or a bit more
Well,
than
also, if we notice when we're practicing, if we notice with discernment what feels good and what feels doesn't, and how we respond in certain situations and environments, then that we take that off the mat as well, and we can not only help ourselves but help others as well by responding in a more compassionate way. Look, as I say, to ourselves and to others when we're off the mat. We do take it into the world what we learn on the mat. It does change. It has the potential to change us and a knock on effect to others when we're out there. I
I
think,
think
yeah.
I think it's that word reciprocity.
Oh
It's
yes,
kind
beautiful.
of, yeah, this is the exchange that's happening, isn't it?
Mm,
Around,
mm,
managing and looking after yourself in order to be there for others.
mm. It's
Um,
a two-way street, isn't it?
has to be, yeah,
Mm,
yeah,
yeah,
very
yeah.
important. Um, yeah, so yeah, wow, well, it's nearly 7 o'clock.
I can't believe it. I can't.
Amazing, isn't it? What a fascinating conversation. Thank you, Max.
Well, thank you. It's been a delight. Yes.
Yeah, and so good to put the microscope on it, to
Ah,
really go there. And
mm.
I hope we can go there again, actually. It'd be lovely if you would be up for coming on again, maybe
I
next.
would. I'd love to come along another time, a little down the road a little and see what's changed. I'm
Yeah,
sure
that
something will
would
have
be,
changed. It's always, it's the only constant thing, isn't it?
isn't it? Yeah, nothing that's guaranteed.
Yeah.
Well, that would be just lovely if you would.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Natalie.
Yeah, and for anyone who missed Haley's podcast, do go back. So Maxine's daughter Haley Matthews was on last month, and yeah, her podcast is really very interesting too. So please do go take a look. That'd be
As
great.
a lot of the others are interesting as well. I've listened to a few. Yeah,
Have you?
fascinating. Yeah.
Oh, oh well, that's great. That's really, really good. Maxine, I'm going to say goodbye now. You
Okay,
go
thank
and enjoy
you.
your evening. Thank you
I'll
so
see
much
you on the mat.
today. I look forward to it. Oh,
Okay.
that's
Bye.
love. Okay.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye, everybody.